ale content z Dark Soulsów. 5 dni temu, Kataliz, nowe wideo wrzucone. Nowy glitch. A to jest ten chyba w Asylum, no nie? Jak jest drabina, to chyba chodzi o to Asylum. Już oglądaliśmy jakieś world recordy,
Dark
nie?
Souls is officially hitting its rebellious teenage years. 14 years old and still pulling off jaw-dropping surprises. In December 2024, a groundbreaking warp glitch shook the speedrunning world and shattered one of its biggest barriers. The speedrunner QQ made history by becoming the first person ever to complete Dark Souls Prepare to Die edition in under 20 minutes without using force quit roam warps.
I fucking did it, dude.
That's a massive deal. In this video, I'll break down the new world record and
W ogóle Kataliz, jaki on montaż robi. Weźcie wy to, oglądajcie, co tu się dzieje na ekranie, nie? Robicie cokolwiek innego, dłużcie, patrzcie na to wideo.
explain the brand new techniques that led to this achievement. But to see why this is so groundbreaking, we must first understand the run's place in the bigger picture of Dark Souls speedrunning. We are talking about the original Dark Souls and not the remastered version. The remaster has unique glitches and its timer runs slower, so direct comparisons are impossible. Vanilla speedruns have several traditional categories. Any % force quit is the only one which allows wrong warping using the Alt F4 shortcut, basically closing the game at specific moments to manipulate outcomes. While clever, it's controversial because it relies on actions outside the game itself, so it's confined to its own category. On the other hand, speedruns without force quits, such as any %, are way more popular, and that's where QQ's world record falls and why it is so special. You see, the last 10-minute barrier in any % was broken in 2020, and for years, no one thought that a run under 20 minutes
Z 29 minut zrobili 20 minut. Żebyście mieli świadomość potęgi tego glitcha.
was possible, but the community, once more, defied all expectations. Before the new discoveries, the record stood at an impressive yet frustrating 20 minutes and 19 seconds, using the Black Knight Greatsword. But now, almost everything differs, including the class selection. Instead of the usual Thief, Hunter, or Pyromancer, the choice is surprisingly Bandit with Black Firebombs. Unlike most other runs, the initial equipment plays no role here, so attributes make the difference, and Bandit has the highest starting strength. Black firebombs are of course used for defeating the Asylum Demon early, but also serve an important purpose later. Let's dive into the run now. The first truly big change happens at Oscar's wall. Traditionally, speedrunners would save and quit here using the character's stand-up animation to break the wall and skip the boulder trap, but QQ instead heads upstairs and along with the boulder aggroes the hollow next to it. The new friend then follows him as he talks to Oscar, which doesn't take long thanks to Q's insane mashing speed. Exploiting enemies for skips isn't new, but what in the world is there to skip here? An asylum. After running downstairs and waiting for the hollow, we start going backwards and try to bait the enemy to the ladder. Using a parry and a left jab, the hollow is repositioned, and then another parry and a riposte occur.
Co to daje?
Without seemingly much happening, we then continue as normal. Without much happening, except for a freaking hollow being parried completely randomly. What's going on? We just performed the technique newly discovered by the glitch hunter Eloise, called ladder storage. In essence, it is the act of interrupting the animation for climbing a ladder. While this trick exists in other From Software games such as Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3,
Ja to na przykład bardzo lubię w grach. Jak glitche z jednej gry na tym samym silniku jesteś w stanie przenieść do drugiej. Zaczynasz zauważyć jakąś logikę istniejącą w kodzie.
or even Elden Ring, Dark Souls is just built different, literally. For some reason,
Ja na przykład rekord świata w Heroesach 3 w speedrunie zrobiłem, używając logiki oldschoolowej gry, jaką było Diablo 2, czajcie? To też było niesamowite. Też zdefiniowałem historię. Słuchajcie, speedrunowanie Heroesów. Oglądając speedruny z Diablo 2.
the known methods of triggering ladder storage never worked in Lordran, until now, and an early game revolution followed. Before I explain the benefits of interrupting the animation, we need to step back and look at how the game stores the player's position. Next to the immediate position, that is where the character is physically located at any given moment, there's also something called the stored position. That is a set of coordinates written down to the save file used to respawn the character after a reload.
Świata
These
Heroes 3? Trzykrotny, kurwa. Trzykrotny, stary.
two variables are usually more or less in sync, though not quite, but more on that later. Stored position is dictated by the ground the character stands on, meaning no position is ever stored in the air. Still, there are floors which the game does not want the player to spawn on and does not store their position on them. For example, on moving platforms, such as elevators. Since a reload places them either to the top or bottom spots, the player would spawn mid-air if the position was stored mid-operation. Similarly, in boss arenas, reloading needs to move the player to the entrance rather than tossing them directly back to action. Ladders work the same way. When climbing a ladder, the stored position remains locked to the ground where the climb began until the player exits the ladder. But what Eloise discovered is that riposting or backstabbing an enemy on the exact frame of pressing the climb button interrupts the ladder climb by prioritizing the attack. Although it's the attack that plays out, the game still acts as if the player started climbing the ladder and locks the stored position accordingly. This allows the player to move freely, in other words, change their immediate position, without their stored position updating. This state then persists as long as they do not reload the game, climb another ladder, or perform specific actions such as pivoting, falling, or bonking a wall. This is why QQ avoids quitting out on the big asylum door, a staple in all the runs. With his stored position locked to the ladder, QQ heads towards the undead merchant in Undeadburg to buy some expected yet essential items. The rapier and shortbow for the bread and butter moose swap glitch, the reinforced club for its power boost over the starting battle axe, and 2 wooden arrows. All of this seems pretty standard so far. But then, something surprising happens. QQ depletes his stamina, which in turn triggers an animation normally seen when falling off a ladder, followed by an immediate save and quit. When he reloads, the character falls from the sky.
Ja nie wiem, co to jest za spaghetti code w tej grze, że tutaj dochodzi do czegoś takiego. Ta sekwencja tych wszystkich rzeczy połączona tutaj. Cofnijmy to może, jeszcze raz to obejrzyjmy.
Moose swap glitch, the reinforced club for its power boost over the starting battle axe, and 2 wooden arrows. All of this seems pretty standard so far. But then, something surprising happens. QQ depletes his stamina, which in turn triggers an animation normally seen when falling off a ladder, followed by an immediate...
W dużym skrócie, postać ma zapisaną sekwencję wchodzenia po drabinie. Ale jeżeli będąc na drabinie zużyjesz całą staminę, to z tej drabiny spadniesz. On cały czas ma zapisane w pamięci, jakby był na tej drabinie, więc zużywając całą staminę, odpala mu się animacja schodzenia z drabiny. Ale w ostatnim momencie wychodzi z gry.
Save and quit. When he reloads, the character falls from the sky, landing somewhere out of bounds and
Nie wiadomo czemu wyrzuca go to w powietrze.
surviving thanks to another quit out. This area is all the way in Undead Parish, right above the huge armored boar. It's an incredible sight. But how on earth does this happen? Let's rewind and find out. At the beginning of the sequence, depleting stamina triggers the falling off a ladder animation. This ties directly to the ladder storage we set up back in Asylum. The stored position got locked because the game considered the player character to be on a ladder. And what happens when you're on a ladder and run out of stamina? That's right, you fall.
Dokładnie.
Therefore, running out of stamina with ladder storage triggers the corresponding animation, even though no ladder is actually involved. But what's the purpose? Why not simply save and quit after visiting the merchant? We should then naturally spawn back in a firelink. What? Remember when I said that the immediate and stored positions are more or less in sync under normal circumstances? The more or less is actually a 4-frame buffer between the two variables. We've covered this in other videos, but it's very important. When the character is moving,
Ej, ciekawe, czy można byłoby to wykorzystać na jakichś triple randomizerach. Można by było, nie?
its stored position is always 4 frames behind its immediate position. Yet, this fact shouldn't cause issues during ladder storage, as the buffer is entirely filled with the ladder's coordinates and not updated, so a save and quit should spawn the player back in Asylum, but the player spawned in Firelink instead. You see, the cutscene transporting the chosen undead from Asylum to Firelink sets the stored position to Firelink as well. That would be a massive problem, but luckily, it bypasses the buffer and instead of filling it with Firelink's coordinates, changes only the active frame of the stored position variable. That means the buffer still contains coordinates from the Asylum ladder, and moving it along for at least a single frame would place them back to the active slot, bumping out the Firelink's stored position. Earlier, I listed some actions that can break ladder storage. As soon as that happens, the game resumes updating the stored position with the immediate position, the one at the merchant. First activating the Asylum coordinates, and 4 frames later, the merchant coordinates. But that negates the entire effect of ladder storage and restores the player's state back to normal. Here's where the ladder fall animation becomes critical.
Znaczy tak, mniej więcej rozumiem, co się dzieje, ale miałbym to komuś wytłumaczyć, to nie dałbym rady teraz.
Besides interrupting ladder storage, it carries another special property. When falling off a ladder, the character first swings their arms violently, and only starts falling after a brief moment. To achieve this effect, the game disables both gravity and collision for the player during the first 28 frames of the animation. This means the character isn't technically touching the ground and the game can't update the stored position. It is during this overlap of ladder storage being broken and the no gravity effect being applied that the game updates the player's stored position for just one frame. Meaning the most recent frame of the buffer is filled with the immediate position at the merchant, in effect pushing out Firelink's coordinates from the active slot and replacing them.
Powiedz mi, że tutaj trzeba wyjść z gry, zrobić tego quit-outa w trakcie tej jednej klatki.
With Asylums. The buffer remains static over the next 28 frames, creating the perfect opportunity to save and reload, and warp to the active stored position at the ladder in Asylum. We call this process the ladder warp glitch. But QQ does not spawn in the Asylum upon reload. Why? Aside from the positions, the game holds another variable that I call last area. Last area dictates which part of the map the game should prioritize during loading, and is determined by what map piece the immediate position, rather than the stored, last came into contact with. As we are at the merchant, Undeadburg becomes last area, while the stored position remains in Undead Asylum due to ladder storage, creating a disconnect between the two variables. Upon reload, the player spawns at the Asylum ladder's coordinates, but it's the Burg map that is loaded, rather than Undead Asylum, and until the immediate position touches solid ground, nothing else can load, meaning the player starts falling out of bounds. But falling into the void...
Zdajcie sobie pytanie, co by się stało w jakiejś nowoczesnej grze AAA, jak ktoś by znalazł takiego glitcha. Gra by się crashowała po prostu, bo tam nie działałaby jakaś logika. A w DS-ach to ma miejsce tylko dlatego, że tutaj jest jakiś ogromny zestaw zasad i ciągłego odnajdywania się tej postaci, tej logiki gry i tych wszystkich zależności. Tylko po to, żeby właśnie ta gra się nie crashowała, żebyś nie miał sytuacji, gdzie z swoją postacią stanie się coś dziwnego i będziesz miał zepsutego save'a. Jest niesamowite, jak ogromna ilość danych tutaj jest zapisana związaną z tą postacią.
is typically avoided due to how interconnected Dark Souls is, and the runner Andrew of T discovered that the Undead Asylum ladder is positioned directly above Undeadburg, or rather Undead Parish, next to the boar. Now, falling from such a height should kill the player instantly, but QQ survives thanks to a unique quirk in the game's mechanics. Usually, falling from a fatal height reduces our HP to 0 instantly when we hit the ground, leaving no time to save our position or quit the game. But certain effects can change the splatter animation into one that delays the HP reduction. This gives us just enough time to save our position at the bottom and reload the game to survive. The Sorcery Fall Control is a well-known example, producing Fall Control quit-out glitches. Remarkably, spawning mid-air rather than on solid ground also triggers this delay, allowing QQ to store a position and reload safely. This is not the last time we will see this principle exploited. The Asylum Ladder Warp...
Wyobraźcie sobie, że poza tym Ladder Warpem on musi spadać z takiej wysokości i w odpowiednim momencie wyjść z gry, bo ta postać uderzając o ziemię nie umiera od razu, a umiera w którejś klatce dopiero. I on musi zrobić dwa takie dosłownie frame perfect quit-outy.
Lets us travel from the Undead...
A potem i tak ktoś ci powie, speedruny z glitchami to nie ma sensu. Za 20 minut ma, zobacz jakie to jest łatwe. Tymczasem te osoby tak jakby spędziły 100 godzin, to nawet raz by tego nie wykonały, nie?
Merchant all the way to Undead Parish. Welcome to Dark Souls Airlines. Please remain seated as we ladder warp directly over Taurus Demon, Hellkite Drake, and the Black Knight Greatsword Tower. Local attractions you will never visit. Next stop, Undead Parish. Prepare for landing. But with no greatsword, it's clear another weapon will have to take center stage. After this huge new skip, the next bit of the run dances to a familiar rhythm. First comes the Sense Gate skip to enter the fortress and Ogląda early, while taking the Undead Parish bonfire for later. We move swap while waiting for the lizard to get smashed by the boulder. Move swap is a classic glitch that allows performing running, rolling, and plunging attacks of one weapon on another. In this case, it combines the rapier's double hit running attack on the club. If you're new to move swap, I've covered it in detail in other videos. The next new optimization is fascinating, as Sense has always been a straightforward part of the run. If this next lizard stays out of the way, it is possible to roll through this table and maintain enough stamina to sprint up the stairs, hug the wall, and narrowly avoid the boulder trap. That saves reloading the game and in turn a second or two. The next boss, Iron Golem, is the reason QQ purchased the reinforced club. But although this weapon is solid for the early game, unupgraded, it does not do particularly well against the Golem. Our goal is to make him fall off the bridge. That requires dealing 400 damage below the knees for a stagger, then another 200 to make him stumble. Since the club alone isn't enough, the remaining black firebombs can help, especially because they can deal double damage by hitting both legs at the same time. The fight starts by throwing one of them while avoiding the opening projectile. Next, we hit the golem with 2 running attacks and throw firebombs while stamina recovers.
Każda sekunda wykorzystywana.
The third one staggers. Then 2 more bombs and 1 last running attack finish the job, sending the iron golem plunging off the bridge. Now, if you were counting, you're probably shouting at the screen, "Wait, I saw 6 firebombs, I swear, that was totally 6 firebombs!" And you're not wrong. The 6th firebomb comes from the item dupe glitch. Consumables without a confirmation prompt can be reused by pressing the Use button at the exact moment the last item is consumed. For the firebomb, that is a 2-frame window. This glitch has been commonly utilized to dupe small souls for early leveling, but applying it here skips a running attack and an R1, shaving precious seconds off the fight. It doesn't look like it, but our attacks are
Czajcie, ile trzeba mieć skilla, żeby to zrobić tak frame perfect, tyle rzeczy naraz w jednym ranie?
so precisely calculated that they deal exactly 400 damage to stagger and exactly 200 for the stumble. Not a single point of damage gets wasted. That's also why the weaker battle axe wouldn't cut it, although the damage difference is tiny. With Iron Golem defeated, the next objective is to reach the Ogląda Cathedral and secure the final key item, the Lord Vessel. QQ does some cool parkour along the way, first on the rafters and then on the spiral staircase. These jumps don't save a lot of time, but every fraction of a second matters in a 20-minute speedrun. Fighting Ornstein and Smo with the club alone would be madness, so we require a different weapon, and the closest, most viable option is the trusty Dragon Tooth. QQ first levels up at the Cathedral Bonfire, allocating 12 Faith for the Force Miracle later, 27 Strength for the Dragon Tooth, 12 Dexterity for his short bow, and finally 12 Attunement for 2 spell slots. After grabbing the weapon, he heads to the boss arena while applying the AI break glitch. I've covered this in full detail, but briefly. We can delay the activation of the boss AI by precisely chaining specific actions. Enemy AI checks for targets every 5 seconds. At the same time, every weapon toggle deloads the player for a few frames to save the new state. If we time the weapon toggle exactly at the 5-second mark, the player effectively becomes invisible to the AI during its update, keeping it idle for at least another 5 seconds or until it is attacked, giving QQ a crucial window to set up. But that doesn't mean the fight becomes easy. After attacking, QQ gets a decent, but suboptimal pattern, bleeding a few seconds.
Tam był chyba movement taki, nie? Żeby konkretny ruch dał. Ale kamerę daje wysoko.
On top of that, he must ride Smo's elevator, which is slower than Ornstein's on the other side of the arena. He then shoots Guinevere with a singular wooden arrow and secures the Lord Vessel. This is why we need 12 dexterity. The arrow doesn't destroy the clone otherwise. Even after clearing Sen's Fortress, the bells still need to be rung to unlock Firelink Altar for the final wrong warp to the kiln of the first flame. QQ heads back to the gargoyles first and tries to AI break the Hollow Room, but distracted IRL fumbles the execution.
Wow. Busy. Huh?
Tam w ogóle net...
Despite taking a hit, he manages to squeeze through. With a mid-game weapon, the gargoyles should go down quickly, unless they fly up.
Nie?
Please don't
Anuluje.
fly up.
No i random przy gargulcach.
Fucking bitch.
Of course, they did. Missing the first running attack on the tail meant QQ needed 3 hits to finish them, instead of 2. After ringing the first bell, it's off to Blighttown to ring the second. First, the Moose-swapped club sends Lotric off a cliff. This is important as it prevents him from killing the Firekeeper and keeps the Firelink Shrine bonfire active. Without the master key for the New Londo shortcut, QQ must pull off the Blighttown skip to reach Quelaag's domain. The skip abuses the aforementioned disconnect between the last area and the stored position variables. You keep the stored position in a specific spot atop the elevator in Firelink, while using the immediate position to set the last area to New Londo. Upon reload, the player spawns mid-air because it's New Londo that loads first, despite the stored position remaining at the top of the
Patrzcie na
lift.
to bieganie,
Quit out then
jakie to
prevents death
będzie.
from fall damage, exactly like during the ladder warp earlier. The only difference is that the disconnect was caused not by ladder storage, but by the unstable ground of the elevator. QQ navigates a narrow seam alongside New Londo while out of bounds to reach a point above Quailag's domain.
Już nie jest granie w grę, nie? To już jest
A
stary...
delayed fall damage
niszczenie
cancel done
silnika
by plunge
gry.
attacking a sloped surface in a particular way allows him to execute a roll just before landing, avoiding fall damage due to the invincibility frames and arriving directly in front of the boss fight. Quailag's pattern was perfect, allowing a constant stream of attacks. With Firelink Alta unlocked, we must now prepare the final wrong warp by visiting Petrus, but his shop is open only to members of the Way of White Covenant. Yet to skip the lengthy acceptance animation, we engage in some super clever menuing. By opening the start menu at the same time as triggering the dialogue with Petrus, our inputs now control both the dialogue and the menu simultaneously. We scroll to the status page in which pressing A does nothing, so we can mash through the conversation without causing mischief in the menu. We answer yes to the first question, and switch to the system menu to confirm a save and quit, but the last input also skips the final line of dialogue, and just before the game fades out to the main menu, we agree to join the Covenant. Our affiliation is updated instantly, while the quit out bypasses the lengthy animation. Upon reload, we access the shop and purchase Force, Homeward, and 2 talismans, one for each hand so we can cast using both the L1 and R1 buttons. QQ then places the Lord Vessel at the Firelink Altar, where he attunes the 2 miracles and warps back to Firelink Shrine for the final wrong warp. The glitch was previously performed using Fireball, which the Pyromancer class starts with. The idea of the setup is to cast one spell with the animation of another spell, in this case casting Homeward, which takes the player to the last bonfire with the animation of Fireball. The animation is so quick that before Homeward teleports us to the last bonfire, Firelink Altar, we have a chance to rest at another, here Undead Parish. Resting during fade out causes the game to lose track of the player's coordinates, spawning them in the area of their last bonfire, but at the first spawn point on the game's internal list, which for Firelink Altar specifically, lays within the cone of the first flame. Yet without Fireball, this setup cannot be used, and that's where Androfty's astonishing setup in Firelink Shrine comes into play. Through a sequence of perfectly planned and cute keyboard inputs, it is possible to land on a consistent spot on the root of this tree. From here, casting Homeward with Force's animation moves the player forward, making them drop off the root and cancel the rest of the animation, creating that brief...
Czy oni po pikselach wyliczyli, jak muszą się poruszyć, by idealnie w trakcie używania animacji spaść z tego drzewa?
Chance to rest at the Firelink Shrine bonfire just before Homeward triggers, resulting in a wrong warp. The most remarkable part of the setup is turning the character. For consistency, we parry with an empty hand, followed by a toggle and a walk-in input, just before another parry. This makes us walk for the exact duration of the weapon toggle, no more, no less. The other parries are then used to chain different movement actions, such as the roll, without accidentally walking first. With this final warp, QQ finds himself 15 seconds ahead of his splits. Only Gwyn stands between him and history, but even he can screw with such a short run. Any extra grab wastes several seconds, which would be devastating given the pace was barely under 20 minutes. It was gonna be a nail-biter.
Nice. 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 Wiecie, dlaczego on go tutaj paruje? Bo jak się go zabije za pomocą pary, to on umiera od razu tak jakby i można wyjść z gry i nie ma animacji jego takiego bardzo długiego umierania.
I fucking did it, dude.
Pyk, jak
Gwyn's
tylko mu
RNG
zejdzie
can ruin
życie,
even the best of runs.
to może
Yet,
quit
for
out robić,
QQ,
nie?
Christmas
Pyk,
came
pyk,
early
pyk,
as on the
pyk.
23rd of December 2024, he delivered a perfect fight to become the first person to complete Dark Souls 80% in under 20 minutes.
This run sucked. Why am I emotional?
This monumental achievement is the result of the hard work of the entire speedrunning community. From the recent discoveries of Eloise and Androv T, to the countless runners and glitch hunters who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. This record is something we can all celebrate. The run wasn't perfect. There were notable points of improvement, as shown by the record already dropping to 1928 since I started writing this video. But whatever happens next, one thing is certain. QQ's name will forever be etched in history as the first runner to break the 20-minute barrier. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of the most exciting Dark Souls speedruns in history. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, thank you for watching.
No, wideo dłuższe niż speedrun, czajcie to? Faktycznie. Nie zwróćmy na to uwagi, no. Wideo dłuższe niż cały speedrun. Zabawne. Zabawne.